Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so very much for being with us today. We have one presentation that is before the Appropriations Committee. We want to welcome Secretary Strickler, who's with the Natural Resources Department. Secretary Strickler.
Thank you, Chairman Torrey, and good afternoon. Vice Chairman Sickles not with us. Ranking Member Cox, good afternoon, and members of the committee. Good to see all of you as well. Thanks for inviting me to speak with you today. I'm Matt Strickler. I've got the privilege of serving as Secretary of Natural Resources to Governor Northam. As you all have seen from the previous broader budget briefings, Governor Northam's proposed a biennial budget that reflects both the importance of Virginia's environment and natural and cultural resources to our economy and quality of life, and the fact that for far too long we have done too little to protect and enhance those assets. I'll give an overview today, briefly, I hope, of the governor's proposals in this space and do my best to answer any questions you have with the help of a bunch of people that I'm about to acknowledge right now who are a lot smarter than I am, so will be a lot more helpful in answering your questions. First of all, my two deputies in the Office of Natural Resources, Ann Jennings, our deputy for the Chesapeake Bay, and Joshua Sachs, our other Deputy Secretary of Natural Resources. Our Special Assistant for Coastal Adaptation and Protection, Ann Phillips, is not able to be here with us today, but she's certainly a key part of our team as well. Our agency heads for our 5 natural resources agencies is Dave Paylor here from DEQ. Nobody? No, not yet. Hopefully Dave Paylor will be with us shortly. Clyde Chrisman, excuse me, sir? Hopefully, yeah. It's a challenge, as you all are quite aware. Clyde Chrisman from DCR is also unable to be with us today. He's having a small medical procedure done, but his deputy, Tom Smith, is with us, along with a number of other great staff from the Department of Conservation and Recreation. Julie Langen from the Department of Historic Resources, our Director of Historic Resources, is here. Steve Bowman, our Marine Resources Commissioner, and Ryan Brown, our Director of Game and Inland Fisheries. And here's Director Paylor from DEQ. So now you all see the faces, you got the names too. The governor's budget focuses in 5 key areas, focusing on targeted strategic investments. You can see here Chesapeake Bay and water quality obviously is a very important area for the governor. Land conservation and state parks, agency operations, climate change and resilience, and historic justice. I will get into greater detail in each of these areas as we go through this presentation, and then I've also been asked to give an overview of the Chesapeake Bay Clean Water Blueprint, our Phase 3 watershed implementation plan to get to our 2025 goal of a restored Chesapeake Bay. So first, as you've seen, the Clean Water Blueprint is Virginia's roadmap for cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay by the 2025 deadline. The investments proposed by the governor are what we think are necessary to keep the Commonwealth on track. You can see here there's significant capital investments from VPBA bonds that are being recommended, particularly for stormwater and wastewater pollution sources. Similarly, we've also proposed the largest ever general fund deposit to the Natural Resources Commitment Fund to help farmers and landowners reduce non-point source pollution for the Bay. That's supported by a 2017 needs assessment that was commissioned by the General Assembly, showing that we need a recommended $35 million at least annual baseline funding in the budget for those objectives, and there's also, as there has been in the past, an additional $10 million proposed each year from the recordation tax fee. The governor is also proposing VPBA bonds be used for $65 million to help Alexandria, the city of Alexandria, meet its combined sewer overflow responsibilities under legislation passed by the General Assembly a few years ago, and what I think is a historic investment in natural capital, $10 million for oyster reef restoration, which is the first time that we have proposed, I believe anybody has proposed using that type of a funding mechanism to restore our submerged lands in the Chesapeake Bay and the coastal bays. So as you can see here, the proposals are $182 million for Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. That's a cost share program with localities, between localities and DEQ. The Water Quality Improvement Fund is for point sources, wastewater treatment plants, a similar mechanism. The mandatory deposit, $47 million from the surplus last year for the Natural Resources Commitment Fund, and then the general fund component for fiscal year 22. This slide shows a further breakdown of the Natural Resources Commitment Fund proposal. In addition to the kind of core part of the agricultural BMP cost share program, there are a number of other programs that are proposed to be funded through this. The Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, which focuses on restoring, repairing buffers and wetlands. The VCAP program, Virginia Conservation Assistance, which is a program to help urban landowners reduce non-point source pollution through cost share. And then all of these are pretty self-explanatory except for the DCR Conservation Application Suite is the tracking tool that we use. It's very important to make sure that we're keeping up with everything that farmers and landowners and others are doing to help us meet our Chesapeake Bay and clean water goals outside of the Bay watershed. On land conservation and state parks, the governor's proposed some fairly significant investments here as well. The top line kind of flagship proposal here is to bump up the funding for the Virginia Land Conservation Fund from the $4.5 million that's was in the current year budget for the Land Conservation Foundation up to the $20 million mark per year, which is what's recommended in the code. There's also a significant proposed capital investment in Virginia State Parks infrastructure. And then these last two items are non-general fund, but I think they're important to mention because they're authorizations to do land acquisitions in our DCR Natural Area Preserve system and for DGIF, to improve some of its wildlife management areas, boating access for recreation, and some key targeted land acquisition projects as well. The next couple slides dig down a little deeper into the DCR capital investments that have been proposed. There's a little bit of money in there for state parks land conservation. It's not a ton. This is the list of authorized projects for state parks. The Natural Area Preserve funding that I mentioned before, there are a number of natural area preserves that would get a piece of that under the proposal. And then the next several items, starting with the $25 million for repairing critical infrastructure repair and residences for staff, is a really important proposal to kind of keep our state parks infrastructure up to speed and able to handle the increasing volume of visitors that they're getting at the parks. On this slide, you can see a few other items, the Belle Island State Park mansion repair proposal, some shoreline erosion projects, which will not only help stabilize shorelines around state parks, but also help us achieve our water quality goals. There's some funding in for soil and water conservation district dam rehabilitation, which is, I'm sure many of you all know, we have a number of dams in the districts that are in disrepair. There's funding proposed for renovation of cabins, which we have seen. There are a lot of cabins that are not up to standard around the state park system, and then some additional money for revenue generating facilities. So moving on from land conservation, as you all heard last week, the governor has rolled out a fairly significant historic justice and equity agenda. There's a legislative component to that that many of you all have seen. There's also a budget component. These are some of the key items in that proposal. The Historic Highway Marker Program, which is the oldest in the country. It's run through the Department of Historic Resources. The governor's proposing to add some additional funding to that, not only to bolster the number of highway markers around the state, but also to create an African American history trail focused around digitizing those markers and highlighting some of the stories that are perhaps undertold in Virginia history. There are also 3 targeted projects for Richmond, Charlottesville, and Alexandria proposed in the budget. The Richmond proposal is to expand the exhibition at Maymont. Charlottesville is to make the Paradox of Liberty exhibit permanent, and then nearly $2.5 million is proposed to purchase and help with renovating the Freedom House in Alexandria. Agency operations is an area that the governor thought it was very important to focus on. This session, these numbers are rounded off. In the next slides, we'll get into more detailed numbers. But the top tier item here, as you can see, is the Department of Environmental Quality. Over the past couple of decades, and particularly since the Great Recession, DEQ, all of our agencies, but DEQ in particular, has been hit very hard. Is in a position now where it really lacks the ability to enforce and ensure compliance with environmental standards in the Commonwealth. It's something that's been recognized not only by the environmental community, but by the business community as well. One of Governor Northam's first actions in office was to issue Executive Order 6, which required a full comprehensive needs assessment of the department. And so all of the proposals that you see for DEQ are originated with that kind of thorough vetting of what the agency needs to do its job. DCR, you'll see there's some increases, mostly for soil and water conservation districts, dam safety, and some operations money for parks. The Marine Resources Commission, will get into some of the things we're asking for fisheries and habitat. And then historic resources, some staff to improve their preservation operations, the highway marker program, their archive space, et cetera. So here's a breakdown of the DEQ funds. You can see the top line number there, air and water monitoring compliance. We want to make sure that we're getting a better handle on what our air quality is, what our water quality is at a baseline level, and making sure that we're keeping on top of that, ensuring that communities are protected, the air quality and water quality that the people in Virginia are experiencing is up to par. We'll keep them healthy, we'll keep their communities healthy. There's a significant amount of money in there for monitoring equipment and also for personnel and some contractual services to help with those obligations. The second line is also one that I think is important to flag. The governor has prioritized since the campaign and throughout his administration doing a better job integrating the concept of environmental justice into the agency operations. What this proposal is, the core of it is to make sure that we have in all of our DEQ regional offices at least one person who's going to be kind of a community outreach coordinator that's going out in the world talking to people in the communities that are impacted by environmental rules, by pollution, getting feedback from them and doing a better job, I think, of being inclusive and responsive to the public and having that information be able to filter back up to headquarters to go into permitting decisions, et cetera. The other items here are things that we think are important to help DEQ work better, help it work better for business, help it work better for the environment, improving the speed and efficiency of our permitting capacity and the air, water, and waste programs, increasing the biosolids permitting capacity, and including a little bit of money to enhance our Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act work with local governments and make sure that all of that work is up to par. For DCR, here are the more detailed items. There are a few things that I think are important to highlight. We do not have currently a lead dam safety engineer at the department, which manages the dam safety and floodplain program. So that's something I think that's really important to make sure that we're keeping an eye on all our dams. We have a lot of high hazard dams that are in danger of failing that we have to monitor and try to get into compliance. So having the engineering capacity there is really important. In addition, the floodplain management positions, now that we're in a world where we've got more extreme weather, more intense flooding, this is something that the governor wanted to prioritize. As well, there's some nutrient related positions to the Chesapeake Bay effort. And then some state parks operational money. The Green Pastures Recreation Area is another one that I wanted to flag for folks. This is actually a national forest recreation area that's in Allegheny County. It was historically one of the few places within the Commonwealth that was designated for outdoor experiences for the African American community during segregation. That's when it was named Green Pastures. Since state parks were desegregated and nearby Douthit State Park was opened to all Virginians, back in the 1970s. That the name of that area was changed to the Longdale Recreation Area. We're proposing to change it back and commit some money to restoring the day use area there, the trailhead, the picnic area, and some other facilities that are really important to folks who have been using that particular recreation area for a long time. It's a very meaningful place to a lot of people. For the Marine Resources Commission, this is another agency that I think we really need to, and the governor believes that we really need to increase their capacity to do their job. We've included a little bit of money for them to hire a coastal resilience manager. They have a lot of responsibility for ensuring that our tidal shorelines are managed effectively. They also have a responsibility for managing all of our fisheries and doing fisheries science, developing fisheries management plans, so offering them a little bit more capacity in that space as well. There's this is our only fee proposal in the budget, but there'll be legislation to accompany this. The bill that passed last year to increase some of the subaqueous leasing management fees, we're proposing to dedicate that to the Marine Resources Commission to cover some of that work, and then also to increase some of the submerged lands royalties on non-oyster leasing ground to fund commission operations for helping implement some of that work as well. Two other things that are worth noting: there's a little money in here, the law enforcement safety line, maybe a little bit too euphemistic, but that's for boat engines. We've got to make sure that our guys can get out on the water and enforce Virginia's fishing and boating laws, so that's a really important piece. And then the unmanned aerial vehicle piece, this is a drone pilot program. We would propose to use it for search and rescue operations only, but there is a lot of water out there, and there are too few Marine police to be able to cover it all. So this is something we think would really enhance public safety on the water, and certainly would report back to you all on how it's going, and if it goes well and it's your pleasure, that's something that we would look towards hopefully enhancing in the future. Department of Historic Resources, I mentioned there's some proposed money in the budget there for staff salary adjustments. DHR is one of in the lower tier of salaries for state employees. The cemetery preservation program is also an area that the governor would like to plus up, and there's legislation that accompanies that too, to allow DHR to manage the African American Graves and Cemeteries program, so that instead of you all having to put in a bill every year and have it put into code for each individual cemetery, DHR would be able to run that program and facilitate getting more cemeteries into the program more quickly and getting some assistance to folks who want to preserve those. I mentioned before the historical highway marker funding and the African American History Trail. On climate change and resilience, the two pieces, well, there are four pieces that are in the budget. The dam safety engineer and the coastal resilience position I mentioned before. Kind of the most important thing from the governor's perspective on this is removing the language that prohibits the Commonwealth from joining the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. This, as you all know, is the Northeast States Consortium that is looking to cap carbon pollution from the largest fossil fuel-fired power plants. Trade those credits to get those reductions in the most economical way, and we'll have legislation that would allow us to use those proceeds for energy efficiency, improvements around the Commonwealth, and also coastal and inland flooding resilience. On the dam rehab side, I mentioned the money that's being proposed for soil and water conservation district dams. There's also some money in there for the DCR Dam Safety Fund, which is for all the other dams, and some funds proposed for DGIF to use its resources for dam rehabilitation as well. So that's the overview of the natural resources budget side. I'll go into the WIP presentation in a second, but I just wanted to pause and see if anyone has questions on that so far.
Any questions from the committee? Delegate Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for coming in and giving the presentation. That last slide just caught my eye. Shows that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you would like to add a position for dam safety lead engineer. That's not a current position that we have already?
The position is, we do not have a lead engineer right now, correct. We have our dam safety department doesn't have a qualified engineer to run that program. I'm looking at DCR. Is that an accurate way to state that? Or Russ, if you want to come up, please. Russ Baxter from DCR is smarter than I am and can answer your question more eloquently.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Russ Baxter with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. In answer to the delegate's question, we have engineers, qualified engineers at DCR right now that are regional engineers, 5 regions that we have throughout the Commonwealth. We're interested in getting a little more horsepower in our dam safety program by having a lead engineer who could help resolve engineering issues amongst the engineers that we already employ, and just offer some guidance to the division director, as well as my role as the deputy that oversees that in another division. That's the intention there.
Delegate Hurst, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A follow-up question to that, and I'm new to the committee, and it may be for my own edification then, but I have, in my prior experience, looked into this issue of dam safety across the Commonwealth. So for the amount that you're requesting, what categories of dam and dam conditions would this try and address? Because I know that you have different qualifying tiers.
Our priority is what we term high hazard dams, and those are dams that, if they are to fail, would likely cause damage to property or loss of human life. So that's always our priority. I'll be honest with you, Delegate, we got a long way to go in getting every dam under certificate and in regulatory compliance in the Commonwealth. I've spoken to a number of the members of the General Assembly about dams in their districts that we've talked about. So these are great steps forward that the governor has proposed. We need to build on these in the future, and I'm happy that the governor's brought them to your attention.
Any other questions? Okay. So we'll move quickly now into talking a little bit more in depth about the Chesapeake Bay cleanup effort. The TMDL is the total maximum daily load, as you all know, and under the 2010 new Chesapeake Bay agreement, we have committed, along with EPA and the other Bay watershed states, to put together what are called watershed implementation plans, which are our state roadmaps for how we propose to meet our clean water goals. When Governor Northam came into office, it was the beginning of the 3rd cycle, so we're putting together our 3rd Phase 3 watershed implementation plan. We spent about a year and a half working on that, working with stakeholders across the spectrum, working with our folks at DCR and DEQ to come up with the inputs to make sure that we're going to have a plan to meet our clean water goals. So I'll get to the details of that in a minute, but just for baseline here, you can see the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It's about 64,000 square miles, stretches up into New York, and then all the way down through Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, with pieces in Delaware. West Virginia and the District of Columbia as well. As you all know, Chesapeake Bay and many Virginia tributaries are impaired waters. Much of the bay does not meet science-based water quality standards set for a number of criteria, including water clarity, underwater grasses, dissolved oxygen, etc. The reason for this, because the bay is polluted with excess nutrients, including nitrogen and phosphorus, and sediment as well. The main sources of this, and this is old news to you, but is nutrients from wastewater treatment plants, and to a lesser extent on-site septic systems, agriculture, urban and suburban stormwater runoff from developed lands, and then again to a lesser extent some loading from natural habitat. So just an update, how is the bay doing? The bay is doing better. There are a lot of folks who have put a lot of time and effort and resources into this, and in 2018 the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Sciences, which does kind of an annual bay report card, showed for the first time statistically significant improvement in main stem bay water quality. So that's great. That actually shows measured progress, and it shows that we're doing the right thing. The VIMS Dead Zone report, which comes out every year, even though we've had really, really rainy conditions in 2018 and through 2019, showed that we held the line on the dead zone, which shows that the bay is becoming more resilient. That's also a very good thing. But there's still a lot of work to be done. The UMC's report card grade dropped from a 54% to 46%, which somehow is a C. I'm not really sure how that works out, but I'll take it. We're over the hump. We're on track to get to where we need to go if we implement what the governor has put forward in this new Phase 3 watershed implementation plan, but we are not on pace to get where we need to go if we continue with the business as usual scenario. So where do we go from here? This is a diagram that kind of shows a little bit of the process that we went through in developing this. At the bottom is the Virginia Interagency Team that I mentioned before. This is DEQ, DCR, VIMS, all of our scientific and management experts that coordinated with everyone from local soil and water conservation districts on the agricultural policies, local planning district commissions on how we deal with developed lands and stormwater. The Chesapeake Bay Stakeholder Advisory Group kind of sits over all of that, and that has members from various sectors of the agricultural industry, conservation groups, local governments, kind of the military, the whole gamut of folks in Virginia who impact water quality and are affected by clean water policy. So we spent about 18 months on these discussions, engaging experts, doing modeling, and keeping in mind the expectations of the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the backstop to ensure that we're not going to fall short of our goals, and we put forward a plan that gives the federal government and the rest of the partnership reasonable assurance that we are going to be able to get where we say we're going to go with our water quality improvement program. So starting with agriculture, this is one of the areas where we need to make a lot of improvements still. Much of our progress that we made from 2010 to 2017 was through improvements in wastewater treatment and getting down the nutrient loads committed to the bay by wastewater. We need about 3/4 of our nitrogen reductions and a little more than half of our phosphorus reductions from the agriculture sector for the rest of the way through 2025. So there's a lot of work to do there. We've certainly been promoting incentives and technical assistance. Our agriculture BMP cost share program, which is very sound, very generous. As I mentioned before, the governor's budget includes about $109 million for cost share and technical assistance over the biennium. The agricultural BMP loan program is something that is also a very effective tool and works for folks in the community who aren't necessarily interested in taking cost share money from the government, but would be happy to take tax relief. So that's another tool we have in our tool set. And certainly we're working to document all of the practices that we have on the ground, making sure that we're getting credit in the Bay model through the program for everything that farmers are doing. And then, that we're setting clear timelines, making sure that by the end of 2025, we are where we need to go, particularly with cropland, nutrient management plans, and with livestock stream exclusion. And that's something that we'll be talking about in the legislative context as session goes on. For wastewater and septic, the biggest thing here that we needed to do is provide reasonable assurance that we're going to get down to lower levels of nitrogen and phosphorus coming out of these wastewater treatment plants. We're really close. We think that there's an opportunity here to potentially get where we need to go through working with the wastewater treatment plant managers and the communities that they serve to figure out ways to strike deals and get cost share assistance to targeted plants that we need to upgrade. In the meantime, though, in order to make sure that we are going to backstop this and hit the deadline, we've started a conversation, a notice of intent to begin a regulatory process on this. Again, it's one that we may or may not actually have to follow through with at the end of the day, but just having it in the works is kind of on parallel paths with some of the talks we're having with wastewater, I think is a really important thing to do, in addition to the money that the governor's proposed in the budget for the Water Quality Improvement Fund to go ahead and start making these upgrades. For developed lands, obviously urban and suburban stormwater, as Virginia continues to grow and develop, are an increasing share of our pollutant loads. We've done a lot of work consulting with local governments on the annual funding needs and this is an area where our commitments are going to really have to step up under this phase of the watershed implementation plan. That's why the governor has proposed some significant investments in the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. As I mentioned, a chunk for the city of Alexandria on their combined sewer overflow, and some money for the Conservation Assistance Program, which again deals with urban and suburban runoff, and then a number of technical assistance initiatives to try to develop capacity, make sure people are only applying the necessary amounts of fertilizer in urban settings, et cetera. And so that's generally the overview of the WIP. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. Ann Jennings, my Deputy Secretary, will probably be the one who has the most information on this.
Delegate Cox.
Secretary, would you go back to the slide dealing with clear timelines and maybe elaborate a little bit more on that September 31st, 2025 deadline dealing with cost share for us? Give us a little bit more detail about what that entails and what that is. Yeah, it's the last.
Is it this one or is it the last?
Yep.
That one? Okay.
December 31st, 2025.
So the thought here, and this is what's in the governor's legislative proposal, is there are two best management practices that are really important for water quality and really effective. One is nutrient management plans to make sure that we're working with farmers to get just the right amount of fertilizer applied at the right time on cropland so that we optimize yields and we optimize water quality. We're at about 63% adoption of those. We need to get to 85% to hit the 2025 goals. The idea is we will continue through the voluntary cost share program to sign people up over the next 6 years. And then if we get to 2025, the end of 2025, and we've hit the 85%, then that's it. All we need is maintenance of effort, and there's no additional activity required there. Similarly, livestock stream exclusion, particularly for cattle, is another really important agricultural best management practice. We're not quite as far along on that one as we are with nutrient management plans, but ensuring that we're excluding livestock from perennial streams, from streams that flow all the time, and keeping those cattle from releasing nutrients into the waterways is a really important thing to do for water quality. So again, the idea is to continue with the voluntary cost share program and try to get everybody signed up by the end of 2025. And there would be in the legislation, there's a certification requirement for whoever the Secretary of Natural Resources at that point is to see if we've hit our goals. If we have, then that's great. Maintenance of effort continues, and that's where we are. If not, then there would be a requirement to sign up for these programs going into effect the following year. And so it's not that anyone would have to have these practices on the ground. It's not that they would have to have the money out the door to pay for them or have them implemented on their land. All you would have to do is by the deadline, go into your local soil and water conservation district and say, sign me up. So that's all we're asking for in the legislation, and the cost share money will hopefully continue to drive us in that direction to hit those goals voluntarily.
Mr. Chairman, follow-up.
Delegate Cox.
But still, you would admit if you don't hit the 85%, it's a mandatory sign-up, and that's a fairly decent departure from what has been a voluntary program. Isn't that true? And if you'll also help me out with the 2025 goals, is that mandated under the 2025 goals, or is that simply a sort of a suggestion?
Sure. So answer your second question first. Yes, it's mandated. Yes, it's enforceable under the total maximum daily load. There's a consent decree in place between EPA and a number of conservation groups that require us to put these practices in place, and the 2025 deadline through the partnership and the Chesapeake Bay program is something that's enforceable. I would say to your question about having something be mandatory, we are hopeful and we want to continue to work through getting to these goals and through the voluntary programs that we have. At the same time, we've been working at this for 40 years, and we are not where we need to be with respect to clean water. The wastewater sector, the urban stormwater sector are both under legal requirements to do certain things to improve water quality. I think if we're going to continue to be putting money into cost share programs for agriculture, that if we can't get where we need to go after this additional 6-year window of voluntary compliance, then we need to have a backstop in place to make sure that we're meeting those water quality goals.
Mr. Secretary, would you go back to your slide dealing with the Alexandria CSO, please?
Where do we have that one?
You're the one that had the 63 million request.
It's mentioned here. It's mentioned elsewhere. I'm not sure I have anything in depth. But
Do you recall the contribution that we made to Alexandria CSO last session, I believe it was?
I do, yes, sir.
And give us a little bit more clarity for the request that you have now, please.
Yes, so the request that we have now is in addition to last year's request.
And that amount was how much?
That amount was, help me out, Director Paler, was that 20 million? 25 million last year. The idea is that because Alexandria is on such a compressed timeline mandated by the General Assembly to get the CSO project done, that this additional investment would lower the impact on ratepayers.
Follow-up, is that consistent with other requests that we have received from across the Commonwealth?
I'm not 100% sure if there have been similar requests. However, I believe that Alexandria is the only combined sewer or only community with a combined sewer overflow that has a mandated General Assembly timeline. The others, Richmond, Lynchburg, and others are on longer timelines under consent orders with the EPA.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Boulevard.
If I could weigh in on that, I think Secretary Strickler, the combination of last year's appropriation and the $65 million will put Alexandria roughly on par with what the General Assembly contributed both for Richmond and Lynchburg. And so it's just a matter of equity among the three jurisdictions. I would also note that, if you look at what Alexandria is accomplishing in terms of reducing the amount of combined sewer overflow, it's far more than what Richmond or Lynchburg have or will be achieving even at the end of their programs.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Mr. Secretary, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before we adjourn, I have just a couple of housekeeping matters to share with the committee. For those of you who missed our meeting on Friday and you did not receive your notebook, please let us know so that you may have your working notebook with you. Also, we have quite a few budget amendments before us. In the past, we have dealt with perhaps between 380 to 600 in the past. You would be happy to know that this session we have upwards to 900 budget amendments, totaling about $13.7 billion. So that tells us that we really do have our work cut out for us. And to my colleagues, I want to just offer you a simple, gentle reminder that on Mondays and Wednesdays, 30 minutes upon adjournment of the House, we do have our meetings. And I would love to look around and see that we have the full committee in place when we began. That would be very helpful, and I appreciate it very much. We have a couple additional announcements from Ann, please.
Mr. Chairman, just wanted to remind everyone that Higher Education Subcommittee will be meeting directly following the adjournment of this meeting, and then Transportation and Public Safety will meet after Higher Ed about 40 minutes after completion of this meeting.
Okay, if there's nothing else before the committee shall rise.
I don't feel bad about those 4 amendments I put in there.